When I first met her, I didn't feel welcome. There was no warmth in her smile, just a kind of overbearing charm that felt staged. Please stay with me as I tell you my story. Don't forget to like, share with your family and friends, and subscribe to this channel. Now back to my story. My boyfriend at the time brushed it off with a laugh and said, "That's just how she is." But deep down, something felt off. It wasn't just nerves, it was instinct. She spoke in dramatics. Everything was either the best or the absolute worst. Her health, her relationships, her stories, always filled with exaggeration, gasps and long theatrical pauses. It was like watching someone audition for a role that didn't exist. But still, I tried to keep an open mind. I was young, in love, and hopeful that we'd eventually warm up to each other. But then came the accusation. Out of nowhere, she accused me of stealing from her $16,000 worth of jewelry and sentimental property. I remember reading the message she sent to my parents and feeling my hands shake, not just at the sheer audacity, but at the thought that she was trying to blackmail us. She said if my parents paid her the money, she wouldn't go to the police. It was a line no one saw coming. My mom was furious. My dad didn't say much, just quietly made it clear we were cutting ties. That should have been the end of it. But instead of owning up to the lie, she spun another story, this time blaming a mysterious, undiagnosed seizure disorder for her behavior. According to her, it had caused hallucinations, confusion, and false memories. She couldn't be blamed. She was the victim of her own mind. That was the day I learned something vital about her. When she's caught in a lie, she doesn't apologize, she rewrites reality. And that's exactly what she kept doing, over and over again. After the theft accusation debacle, my family was shaken, but she wasn't. In fact, she acted like we were the ones overreacting. Her excuse, a conveniently vague seizure disorder that, according to her, could make her forget things or confuse events entirely. She never offered a formal apology. Instead, she dropped breadcrumbs of sympathy about how hard her life was, how misunderstood she felt, how illness made her do things she couldn't remember. Every conversation became a tightrope. Challenge her, and you're attacking a sick woman. Say nothing, and she bulldozes through with more lies. And then, she shifted the blame. Since my parents wanted nothing to do with her, after the extortion attempt, she started telling people that my dad was the reason, that he was controlling my mom, that if it weren't for him, she and my mom would be best friends, despite the fact that they'd only met once, briefly, at the hospital during my delivery. It was delusional. My mom wanted no relationship with her. She didn't need convincing. But that didn't stop my mill from weaving her fantasy, where she was the sweet, misunderstood matriarch, being kept from the loving bond she deserved to have with my family. She played it like a long, tragic tale. If only your dad wasn't so cold. She'd sigh dramatically to my partner. Your mom and I would have such a special connection. The irony, my dad was the calmest man I knew. Quiet, kind, patient to a fault. He avoided conflict, sometimes to his own detriment. But now he was being used as a villain in her imaginary drama, a scapegoat for her own rejection. And no one called her out. We all just tried to move forward. But I should have known then. She didn't let things go. She stored every perceived injustice. And one day, she'd come back for the spotlight. She doubled down on the idea that my father was the gatekeeper between her and my mom. The problem wasn't her behavior, her lies, or her total lack of boundaries. It was my dad. Always my dad. She'd go on about how if he weren't in the picture, she and my mom would be sipping wine together, going on shopping trips, sharing secrets. It would have been comical if it wasn't so disturbing. They had met once, one short visit during the birth of my child. There was no relationship, no history, no shared memories, just one encounter where my mom was polite, cautious, and determined to keep her distance. But Mill's delusion didn't need reality to thrive. She believed the story she told herself. And that story had a hero, her, a villain, my dad, and a helpless victim, my mom. She brought this up constantly to my partner, like a broken record. Your dad brainwashed your mom against me. She'd whisper, shaking her head like it was some tragic betrayal. But I know she likes me deep down. She just can't say it with him around. And as if her fantasy friendship wasn't enough, she kept inserting herself into our lives in subtle, manipulative ways, offering unwanted help, showing up unannounced, gifting things with strings attached, like toys for the baby that came with conditions. Tell your mom I picked this out just for her granddaughter, she'd say, trying to wedge herself into a relationship that didn't exist. My partner kept saying she means well, but I knew better. She didn't want peace, she wanted control, and if she couldn't get it by being liked, She'd get it by being pitied. But when my father got sick, I found out just how far she was willing to go for attention. It was the kind of phone call that silences everything. My dad had been feeling tired for weeks, brushing off the symptoms like he always did. Just a little worn out, he'd say, waving it off with a smile, but deep down, we all knew something wasn't right. Then came the official word, cancer. It hit like a freight train. I remember sitting on the edge of the couch, my knees pressed together, barely breathing as my mom explained what the doctors found. The room was quiet, not from shock, but from heartbreak. We knew this was going to be a long road. In those early days, our family pulled in tightly. My dad was stoic, but I could see the fear in his eyes. My mom kept herself busy researching treatments, making appointments, trying not to fall apart. And me, I was just trying to stay afloat, juggling work, parenting, and grief before it even fully arrived. And the last thing I wanted was her to know. I told my partner, please don't say anything to your mother. I knew her too well. If she found out, she'd find a way to make it about herself. She always did. This wasn't a woman who offered support, she offered complications. But the secret didn't stay a secret. My partner let it slip innocently, without thinking. And like clockwork, it began. 2 weeks later she called, sounding breathless. Dramatic, you're not going to believe this. She whispered, I just got diagnosed too. My stomach sank. No, I thought, please don't do this now. But she did. She latched onto the darkest time of my life with both hands, like a parasite drawn to pain. And what came next was a storm of lies so outrageous. I couldn't make sense of it, because while my father fought for his life, she was stealing the spotlight with an illness she didn't even have. 2 weeks? That's all it took from the time my father's diagnosis slipped from our lips to her grand announcement. She called my partner crying, it's liver cancer. She gasped, and they think it might also be cholangiocarcinoma. The timing was unreal, the audacity, unbearable. I stood there, watching my dad struggle to remember what day it was, his hands shaking from the new medications, while she paraded around with imaginary tumors and tailies of miraculous strength. Every time we tried to focus on my father's needs, she found a way to twist the attention back to herself. They caught it early, she said at first. No need for chemo or radiation. Then suddenly, the story changed. I've been getting secret treatments. I sneak out at night, so no one worries about me. Secret treatments. It was like a child's lie, too detailed, too unbelievable. She said she wore a wig but wouldn't show anyone. Claimed she was undergoing experimental infusions at an unnamed clinic. Always vague, always shifting her story when someone asked too many questions. And the worst part, she had the nerve to say, but I'm not trying to take attention away from Rob. Please don't worry about me. That sentence echoed in my mind. She wanted us to worry. She wanted us to compare her struggle with my dad's, like it was a game of who deserved more sympathy. While my dad's body was breaking down in front of us, she was crafting elaborate fiction, painting herself as a quiet warrior, fighting a private battle. Except we knew the truth. There were no medical records, no doctors, no side effects, just her word. And by then, her word meant nothing. Still, she kept the performance going, while my father faded more and more each day. As my father's condition worsened, the emotional weight on our family became suffocating. He was starting to forget names. The man who used to help me with my homework and grill on Sundays now struggled to hold a spoon. It was like watching a candle flicker in a room slowly darkening. But just as the sorrow deepened, so did her spectacle. Her cancer kept evolving. Every few weeks, a new organ was infected. They've found a mass in my kidneys. She texted, now they think it might be in my lungs too. We stopped asking questions, not because we believed her, but because we didn't have the emotional capacity to entertain her fantasy while battling the very real collapse of my dad's health. Her stories never matched up. First, it was early detection, no treatment needed. Then it was chemo, done in secret. Then it was surgery, but done so minimally that not even a hospital visit was necessary. Every time someone pressed her for details, she'd shift, it's experimental. You wouldn't understand. I don't want to talk about it. But she always made sure to say, don't worry about me. The cruelty was subtle but intentional. She inserted herself into conversations about my dad. Funny how we're both fighting cancer at the same time, she said once, as if it were some shared bonding moment. Except she wasn't fighting anything. She was feeding off our grief like a leech, desperate to stay relevant in the worst moment of our lives. Meanwhile, my father's prognosis grew bleak. The treatments were no longer working. The doctors tried cranial radiation to keep the cancer from spreading to his brain. But it left him confused, disoriented, like a ghost of the man he used to be. There were no miracles in our story, and she knew that. Yet she kept going, lying, smiling, offering dramatic sighs and fabricated updates about her health, each one another stab into a family already barely holding together. It was no longer attention-seeking. It was cruelty. The final weeks were the hardest. My dad, once so full of warmth and quiet strength, could barely form sentences. The radiation left him fragile, his memory fractured, his spirit buried beneath confusion. We bathed him, fed him, whispered to him like he was still there. Maybe part of him was. And still, she lingered. She had the gall to call and ask how I was holding up, only to pivot mid-conversation and share that her numbers were rising again, and the doctors were concerned. I bit my tongue so hard I tasted blood. There was no compassion in her voice, only a hunger to be seen, even in the shadows of our grief. We lost my dad quietly, with no dramatic moment, just a final exhale that left the house in stillness. My mom clutched his hand for hours. My partner cried. I just sat on the floor beside his bed, staring at his socks. It should have been a time for mourning, but not for her. Days after his death, she sent a message. I really thought once Rob was gone, things would be better between me and your mom. She wrote, as if my father's death was some overdue removal of an obstacle, not a tragedy. I couldn't believe it. While we were lighting candles and making funeral arrangements, she was scheming her way into holiday plans, pushing to be part of our first Christmas without him. My partner, finally seeing it fully, told her no. She sulked. I just don't understand why I'm being shut out. I wanted to scream. You're being shut out because you faked cancer while my father actually died from it. You were never part of the grief, only the noise. After the funeral, our home was a shell of itself. Quiet, solemn, and aching. My mom barely spoke. I buried myself in errands, paperwork, and grief counseling sessions that never quite hit the right nerve. And then, she called again. I just want to talk to your mom, she said sweetly. I know she must be lonely. I almost dropped the phone. I told her firmly, now is not the time. But she kept pushing. She needs me, she insisted. I've been through cancer too, we're connected. That's when something in me snapped. You haven't been through cancer, I said, my voice steady but hard. You've been through nothing like what we just lived through. You pretended while my dad suffered, and now you're using his death as a wedge. That's not grief, that's manipulation. She went silent. Then came the tears, the defensiveness, the denial. She wasn't faking. She claimed her doctors just weren't conventional. She never wanted attention, just understanding. But it was too late. I hung up, then I blocked her number, and I told my partner that any communication with his mother was now his burden, not mine. For the first time, I felt something close to peace. Not joy, not relief, but clarity. It was time to protect ourselves, from her chaos, from her delusions, from the way she had weaponized sympathy like a dagger. We couldn't stop her lies, but we could choose not to participate in them. And that was our boundary. Cutting her off wasn't a single act. It was a series of decisions, one boundary at a time. No more updates, no holiday invites, no space for her name in our day-to-day conversations. My partner supported it, though I could tell it stung. It's never easy to admit that your own parent is toxic, but he had seen it, really seen it. And finally, he stopped making excuses for her. My mom and I started healing in slow, quiet ways. We took long walks with no destination. We watched my dad's favorite movies in silence. Sometimes we laughed, sometimes we cried. But we did it without needing to perform for anyone. That first holiday without my father was brutal, but sacred. We lit a candle for him. We ate his favorite meal. We shared stories, without anyone trying to redirect the spotlight. She texted, of course, "Merry Christmas, I'm thinking of Rob." I didn't reply. She sent a voice note a week later, sobbing about how no one was there for her, that we had abandoned her too, that she'd been through so much, and didn't deserve to be punished. But she did deserve to face the consequences of her deceit. She had tried to turn our grief into her performance stage, and when the curtain finally fell, there was no applause, only silence. We were learning to live again, without her interference, without her theatrics, without her bleeding into every raw moment, with tales of fabricated pain. Rebuilding without her wasn't easy. There were still moments of doubt, especially for my partner, but each day we chose peace over pity, honesty over manipulation. And slowly, our lives began to feel like ours again. Healing isn't loud. It doesn't come with fanfare or declarations. It comes in the small moments, Like waking up and not checking your phone for damage. Like lighting a candle without crying. Like laughing without guilt. For the first time in years, peace wasn't something we had to negotiate. It just was. My partner and I found new rhythms. We had hard conversations about boundaries, about trauma, about the roles we'd let people play in our lives for too long. We unlearned the idea that family means endless tolerance. We redefined what family meant to us: truth, safety, mutual care. As for her, she didn't stop trying. She sent a letter weeks later, handwritten and rambling. In it, she hinted that her cancer had come back again, and that she hoped we could all find forgiveness. It was full of contradictions, excuses, and indirect jabs. We didn't respond. We had already said everything we needed to, with silence, with distance, with choosing ourselves. And that ultimately was the power, walking away. Not because we hated her, not because we wanted revenge, but because we finally accepted that we didn't have to bleed to make her feel whole. We owed our grief the dignity she tried to strip from it, and we owed ourselves the freedom to heal without her noise. Some stories don't end in reconciliation. Some stories end with a door gently, finally closing. And on the other side, a quiet, steady kind of hope. Please like, share with your family and friends, and subscribe to our channel for more stories.